We're heading into a new long-term housing boom, but when the cycle ends, the impacts could be ugly.
Local News 8 reporter Caitlin Miklos saw some similarities between what's happening now and what led to the 2008 recession and set out to see if we're heading for another financial crisis.
Concerns, staggeringly high unemployment levels, and home values at the highest level since 2006 could lead into another housing bubble.
And then that happens.
What is that?
That's America's housing market.
But economists say the big short is a long shot.
What we see is really a tale of two economies.
ISU economics professor Carl Geisler has been looking at economic spillover for years, although there might appear to be similarities between what's happening now and what led up to the 2008 housing bubble. He says the outcome will not be the same. He explains we're seeing a run-up in housing demand despite record levels of Americans out of work because of a widening inequality gap.
Those who are relatively already well off have bounced back, and those who were struggling to get by before the pandemic have really yet to see economic relief.
Now, this K-shaped recovery means those lucky enough to keep their jobs during the pandemic now able to afford a home.
I think places like Eastern Idaho will see an influx of relatively high income earners who are working remotely and choosing to live in a place with a good quality of life, low cost of living.
But with record high home values and historically low interest rates, more people are using their homes as collateral. And if this looks familiar, unlike 2008, he says people are not spending more, just reallocating their funds and paying off debts.
If you consider that long run inflation typically runs about 2% in the US, the real interest rate on mortgages right now is about as close to zero as you can get.
And unlike 2008, banks now verifying your employment and credit scores for mortgage loans. They've lowered the debt to income ratio, and the biggest factor.
We don't have those subprime mortgage-backed securities that were at the root of the Great Recession. Those were held by every bank and hedge fund and mutual fund, and we just don't have that systemic risk anymore.
So even if people have mortgages they're not able to repay, the same risk just isn't there.
Even if we do see an uptick in foreclosures, which in the next year or two we probably will see an uptick in foreclosures given the sustained high levels of unemployment, I don't see that leading to an economy-wide crash like we had in 2008.
He adds the key to avoiding a financial crisis is bringing mortgage rates back up slow and steady. But he says that can't happen until unemployment returns to pre-pandemic levels and doesn't expect that to happen until 2024. So although it's not time to start betting against the housing market, he says the smartest thing you can do is to use the low interest rates to pay off your looming debts.
As interest rates go back up and inflation heads back toward 2%, that's the Fed's target. If you can borrow at 2 or 3%, you're basically, borrowing free money.
In Pocatello, I'm Caitlin Miklos.